So for my talk today, I'm going to be talking about my thesis work, which is a book I wrote entitled The Forgotten Mathematicians. So the point of this work was to look at ancient mathematicians of color and see just how many discoveries by mathematicians of color have been credited to white European mathematicians. And it was also to celebrate these mathematicians and to showcase just how many we don't know. And I also really hoped that this work would show students of color that there are mathematicians that look like them, that have come from their communities, and people that they can look up to just as much as Pythagoras or Archimedes. Of course, there are way too many mathematicians to talk about in just 20 minutes, so I'm going to be highlighting two from the four major regions that ancient mathematicians of color came from, which was China, India, Arabia, and Japan. There's evidence that mathematics was also studied in Africa and Latin America, but this was done mostly by tribes and communities of people. We don't have record of a specific person, so I've left that for a future project. So we're going to start out with China, because China actually has possibly one of the oldest surviving math works in history. And the first person we're going to talk about is Liu Hu. Liu Hu lived from 220 to 280 CE, and he is most known for his commentary on Zhu Seng Suang Shu, or the 9 chapters on the mathematical art. Now, historians don't know the exact origin of Zhu Seng Suang Shu. It is possible that it was written as early as 2000 BCE, or somewhere around 200 CE. So it is possible that it is one of the earliest mathematical texts, predating Euclid. However, we don't know for sure. Some of the kind of important takeaways, because I can't talk about everything, is the 9 chapters, obviously 9 chapters with 246 problems spanning from engineering, land surveying, trade, taxation. A lot of mathematical problems in ancient civilization had a purpose, were applied to some usage. Some of the most important takeaways is that this book, we see for the very first time in history the manipulation of fractions, as well as the appearance of negative numbers. We also see Gaussian elimination. So Gauss did not discover Gaussian elimination. It was actually Chinese mathematicians, and it wasn't, Gauss didn't discover it until centuries and centuries later, as well as the Pythagorean theorem is also found in this book. And so it is possible that Pythagoras wasn't actually the first person to discover the Pythagorean theorem. The next person I want to talk about is Yang Hu. Now, no familial relation. We're kind of now fast forwarding to the 13th century. So Yang Hu lived from 1238 to 1298. And he is actually credited for inventing Pascal's triangle. However, it was actually his teacher, Zhao Zhang, who invented it. However, all of his work has been lost, so Yang Hu actually has the first surviving illustration of Pascal's triangle. So Pascal didn't invent Pascal's triangle. And so they were able to construct the triangle with the binomial theorem up to the 6th row. Yang Hu is also known for his work with magic squares. Magic squares are similar to Sudoku, where the row, column, and diagonal have to be added up to equal the same number. And so the first ever magic square was created by Yu Hu in 190 BCE, and Yang was the first to create a magic square greater than a 3 by 3, and he actually was able to create a magic square up to a 10 by 10. He is also credited for discovering magic circles. So for the magic circle, the sum on each circle, as well as the sum on the diameters, must be equal. So we'll now move on. Oh. So here is Pascal's triangle. Actually, this one is created by Zhu Shiji, a Chinese mathematician that came after Yang Hu. And he was able to construct it further from the sixth row. And so these are 6 mathematicians that discovered Pascal's triangle before Pascal, including Omar Khayyam and Al-Qajari in Arabia and Varahamihira in India. So Pascal's triangle was known around the world, and Pascal just had no idea and just later rediscovered it and credited it to himself. Next, we'll be moving on to Arabia. The first person, So the first person we're going to talk about is Abu Kamil. Abu Kamil is one of a big name that came out of Arabia. He lived from 850 to 930 CE. He is known as Al-Hasib al-Misr, or the calculator from Egypt. Historians have actually found parallels between Abu Kamil's work and Fibonacci. All of his most important works have survived, which is actually very rare. He wrote a book on algebra, a book on surveying and geometry, and the book of rare things in the art of calculation. He is the first Arabian mathematician to solve indeterminate equations of the Diophantine type. And historians believe that Abu Kamil's work actually predates Diophantus Arithmetica because the book of rare things in the art of calculation contains methods not found in Arithmetica. The next mathematician that I want to talk about is Al-Kashi, another big name that came out of Arabia. He lived from 1380 to 1429. He is credited for inventing decimal fractions. However, this is slightly incorrect. Decimal fractions were actually already being studied in Arabia at Al-Qajari school, who is another famous Arabian mathematician, and was being studied by Al-Samawal at the school. So they actually believe that the real discoverer is Al-Yuqlisi, another Arabian mathematician. And then in the West, the decimal fractions weren't even known until the 16th century. Some fun facts: Al-Kashi was able to calculate the perimeter of polygons inscribed and circumscribed in a circle with 8,005,300,006,368 sides. How he did this, we actually don't know, but it is incredibly impressive, the work that ancient mathematicians did. One of his most famous works, the Calculator Key, became a standard arithmetic and algebra book in Arabian universities up until the 17th century. We'll now move on to India. The first mathematician we're going to talk about is Mahavira. Mahavira lived from 800 to 870 CE. One of his most famous texts is Ganita Sangraha, which is one of the first Indian books to focus exclusively on mathematics. It also includes shadow problems, which were very popular in ancient India. They would calculate time as well as the height of a man, pillar, or tree using shadows. And this is sometimes considered ancient Indian trigonometry. Mahavira also includes what he called Kutikara, which is proportional division. Proportion problems and the distribution of goods was very popular in ancient civilizations around the world. And he is also one of the first Indian mathematicians to include radicals in his equations. The next Indian mathematician that I want to talk about is Hemistrata. Hemistrata lived from 1089 to 1173. Now, Hemistrata, as well as Mahavira, were both Janina mathematicians. So similar to the Pythagoreans, Jornada mathematicians were people that followed Jainism, a religion founded in India around the 6th century, but they also studied various subjects, including mathematics. And so Jornada mathematicians were unique because they believed in infinity, unlike the Greeks. And they also discovered Pascal's triangle, but they called it Muru Prastara, which, if you know, they also believed in the Meru Mountain. So the Meru Mountain was basically this mystical mountain which you couldn't climb, and would basically, an act of God would take you to heaven, and it was located in the North Pole where heaven was, and the South Pole is where hell was. So they saw Pascal's triangle as this mystical mountain in many ways. Hemitrata is also known for studying the Fibonacci numbers before Fibonacci. Indian mathematicians actually had been exploring the numbers as early as the 7th century. Majority of Hemitrata's work is actually religious and political. So one of his most significant achievements was persuading the king of the Solanki dynasty, where he lived, to outlaw violence against people and animals. Hemitrata's most famous work, which is, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Trisa Sasala Kapru Karita, I'm saying that with a Spanish accent, I know, or Deeds of the 63 Illustrated Men, which provides a history from the perspective of Jornada teachers. Finally, we will, we will fast forward to the Edo period, so around the 16th century in Japan, which was their golden age, and also this big revolution of mathematics. So the first person we're going to talk about is Seiki Takakazu. Seiki Takakazu is often referred to as Japan's Isaac Newton. He's also the father of Japanese mathematics. Seiki studied various topics such as Newton's approximation theorem, resultants and determinants, convergence, maximum and minimum theorems, among others. He actually discovered the Bernoulli numbers before Bernoulli. He found Lebesgue's formula, the general formula for the determinant of a matrix, before Lebesgue was even born, and he used Atkins' delta squared process to calculate his value of pi, which was later discovered by Atkins in the 20th century. He is also known for establishing one of the most famous schools in Japan, the Seiki-ryu, where the best mathematicians would come to study until the 19th century. His successor, Takeshi Katahiro, is the second most famous Japanese mathematician. He discovered a formula for infinite series expansions before Japanese mathematicians, or as they were called, Lasan mathematicians, discovered calculus. He also found the Taylor series of arc sine 15 years before Euler. And the calculation of pi was a very big deal for ancient mathematicians. One of the first ancient mathematicians of color to calculate pi was Liu Hu. And so a lot of the mathematicians, they would start with a hexagon, so a 6-sided polygon, and then they would divide it into 6 equilateral triangles. And so since pi is defined as the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter, they would say, okay, well, this has 6 sides, and then the diameter is 2 units, so then since the hexagon is a little bit smaller than the circle it's inscribed, that means that pi must be greater than 3. But then they took it much, much further. Liu Hu then doubled the number of sides to get a dodecahedron, and then kept doubling until he got a 96-sided polygon, which was the same polygon that Archimedes used to determine his approximation of pi. Liu Hu then went further than Archimedes and used a 192-sided polygon to calculate an accuracy of pi to 3.14. He then went even further than that and used a 3,072-sided polygon to get 3.14159. Siki then used, fasting forward to the Edo period, used a 131,072-sided polygon to get an accurate value up to the 10th decimal place. Takibi then went off of his master and went further and got 41 digits. However, he did it with a 1,024-sided polygon. So how did he do it with a smaller polygon? Well, he actually used Richardson extrapolation before Richardson invented it, as well as Atkins' acceleration method, and used those to calculate pi. So, in conclusion, obviously you can see there's so many discoveries that are credited to white European mathematicians that were actually made by mathematicians of color, some of which were centuries and centuries earlier. And I'm not saying that they stole their work. A lot of it was the lack of communication. During the Edo period, they had the Exclusion Acts, and so what happened was white European mathematicians were just doing rediscoveries that they didn't realize were rediscoveries. However, that aside, we can see that the fact that we don't know any of this information, that we don't know these mathematicians, shows the racism within the history of mathematics and shows the things that we need to fix. And here are just, I think it's gone. Well, okay. I think maybe we need to do that again. I don't think.
That's okay. Thank you. How many mathematicians do you have in your thesis? Just an estimate.
Probably like 30 or more.
And why did you make this special selection for this meeting?
Well, for this meeting, I wanted to include people that, since it's a history of math conference, mathematicians that were common knowledge, which almost all of them aren't. However, based on your input, Siki Takakazu and Takibi are the biggest names and also have the most information on them, because the more popular the mathematician, the more history that was written down, so the more that I can talk about.
The Chinese mathematician that worked in Gaussian elimination, do you remember an estimate? You don't need to be precise. The year he lived, what century? If you don't remember, that's okay, but for sure.
You or Yingyu?
The one you showed with the Gaussian elimination. I think the first or the second.
That was Liu Hu. He lived from 200 to 280 CE. But he didn't actually invent Gaussian elimination. It was already written in the book, which we don't know who the authors are.
That's nice. Okay, yeah. Okay, Alex, thank you so much. I love your talk, okay? Say bye.